This is also oh, that is it. Yeah, recording. That's what I was going to say before I got into it. So again, we are having a very good reflection about how classrooms are a little bit about expecting the unexpected. So we plan for as much as we can, but we are not mind readers. I mean, I am a witch, as you can see from my picture, but even I cannot foretell everything. And sometimes classrooms, students can throw you a few curveballs, and that is just part of the job. And it's not a bad thing that you didn't plan for everything, but it's a good thing to plan for as much as you can. Like, think about your setting as much as you can so you can be prepared for some things and then adapt from there. So the opening, as I say, is very strategic because it's like at the top of the class, you get the people to relax, you get the people in the mood to start. You can even start introducing something and get them very sneakily to practice the abilities that they have already begun to master or the abilities that they are trying to strengthen. So it is a moment where people are still kind of unawares, and then you're in the middle, you're like getting into it properly. So now we are going to talk about the next section in our plan, which is let me just change the slide here so we can where is it? Where is it? Introducing new material. And this is like how we actually begin to get into it with the students. We introduce new materials and we start giving up control a little bit. So, as you probably discussed earlier, in our lesson plan, we are going from a point where the teacher is participating a little more to a point where we're hoping our students take a little bit more control of the modeling, of the practice, of the skill itself. And this also is built over time, and students sometimes take a while to build their confidence. So, in the first few classes, don't get frustrated if this isn't always accomplished. Not all classes get the students up to this point, not all sessions, right? But we want to eventually come to a point where they feel comfortable enough that they will do so gradually. And it also, the situation of each student, as I said before, is quite different. So I was speaking about my brother who was um, a challenging student when he was in elementary, but he is a great learner. So maybe he wasn't the kind who was going to raise his hand and participate in every class. But when you started evaluating and assessing how much he had learned, he really did learn. So you also need to remember that maybe you need to give this space. Like some students aren't so comfortable sharing, and if you find other like different ways of assessing during class whether they're still with you, that's a good idea to make them feel comfortable enough that when you ask for a writing task or something, that will also be their way of showing that they are advancing with their skills, right? So in this introducing thing, sometimes you feel like you're kind of you starting off a little bit shaky or whatever. And I would say that a good piece of advice is don't despair. At first, when you're introducing the first topics, the kids are really fresh from a different class, from a different teacher. So at first, it is very normal for them to be less receptive. It's very normal for them to be a little bit more like have more barriers. Even if you're trying to make it fun, even if you're trying to make it relatable, it takes a while to also for them to get a feel of what kind of teacher they're dealing with. And that's okay. So, and also they're starting like a new book, probably, like a new series of topics. So, at first, introducing topics will take more explanations in Spanish, maybe, It will take a little more time. It will take a little more patience. You will have to keep the floor for longer periods of time in the classroom, and they will have fewer participations, but it gets better over time. So once they have built like the basis of what they're learning, once they have learned some words that they're going to be using in the classroom, once they kind of put their guard down a little bit, they'll start participating more. So the first few days, maybe weeks of class can be a little less encouraging as a teacher, and then they get better. And of course, not everything can be fun and games. We try to make the class as light as possible. We try to make it as practical as possible because the way you learn a language is to use a language, but you also need to check back on structure. And there are also ways to do that with your students and make it make sense to them. Again, we have very different kinds of students. So there are students who are going to do a lot better with their hands on, like trying to recreate a structure. And there are students who are very logical, who, if you give them like the building blocks and you codify them in a way that makes sense to them, that's going to help them. So it's always a good idea to check back on structure. Um, okay, so here I am basing myself off your checklist. So your checklist, basically, what it says is the first part is you give an explanation. And at this point, it's just very concise. You give an explanation, you say, we're going to do this. This class is about this and that. By the end of this class, you will be able to do this. And then you start modeling content. And that's when you give examples. And at this point, it's important to remember that it's a great idea to allow mistakes here and to actually introduce mistakes yourself here. So you model the content as it looks when it's correct and when it is incorrect, so that they can look at some basic mistakes that they could be making with the words that they have. And then that's the point where you can collectively build on that information and try to create like a little scheme for what structure you're using, like a little guide for each one. And that can be done either individually, like what everyone understood, or you can create like a common language, like I do with my color coding, and then try to base yourself off that. But always give them like the flexibility to also explain it to themselves in their own terms, so that they can take the most they can from it. And then we start doing like a lot more student-based activities. Like they will verify, you will try to get them to do the model themselves, to practice amongst themselves, to look for examples of the model in English, in materials that could be listening again, or they could be like a little text, or they could be like an exercise in their book, and start verifying that they're there. So again, so when you're going through all of these like sub steps, it's a good idea to keep what is coming ahead in mind. So in the first explanation, you don't want to go way too deep. You're just to the point. It's like your title page. We're going to learn this, or you can check back with previous knowledge. So do you remember we studied pronouns? Okay, so by the end of this class, we're going to use them with the correct forms of these verbs. So you're just giving them the goal again and making it very explicit, very clear. Like this is what we're aiming for in the next few minutes that we're going to be sharing. And at this point, you can also still hold off from writing on the blackboard so that they don't get distracted by other things, unless you're trying to introduce material that you're going to build on during the class. Right. And then you start modeling the content, and you're already thinking about how this content is going to help you build the structure, right? So again, this is a great place for listening and for getting students to speak. So you start kind of giving them the floor a little bit more. And it's a good place for mistakes. So you can do like the words that you're trying to use and bits of songs that have those words and just have them listen for the words that they already have there. And then you can go into why you're using one and not the other in each one of these examples, right? So this is an exercise that I've done with a few students. Or you could have them read out model conversations and then have some that have incorrect usages and go like, does that sound right? No, it should be do you, and then have them correct the exercise, right? So you could have a lot of different little dialogues. Some of them are right, some of them are wrong, and we all start trying to notice when they're wrong, getting the pattern. Once they get the patterns of what you're trying to aim for as a skill or as a structure, then you can establish like a way to codify this. So again, for me, color coding words or parts of sentences is super useful because I don't know why. I guess when I started learning like maths and like sets and subsets, that makes a lot of sense to me and it's very graphic. So I feel like for some people like me, it's very helpful. And then you can connect things with little arrows. And after they have built like their own explanation, after seeing many examples and seeing, okay, this is right, this is wrong. So if I want to create like a big formula for this, it would look like this. After all of this, that's when we would look at a textbook, I think. For me, that works better than looking at the textbook beforehand. Because sometimes if you give them that right away, they don't really think about it. It's like, oh, it's there. That's my model. I don't need to do anything. So if you build toward it, I feel like it's easier for them to keep it in their memory. So for example, I thought about maybe using the right usages for verbs, the right conjugations for third person. So having examples with little stickers and putting them in the right place after modeling a few conversations using these verbs, right? We can add questions, we can add my name, her name, whatever, and put it here with it. We can add whatever we want. So you can have little pictures that they can stick to the blackboard in the right conjugation of each verb, or you can just ask the whole group and put them wherever most people vote and then correct for that. So this is a way to start building on conjugating abilities for present tense. And these are actual examples from my online classes. So you can, after you've modeled again, do this, for example, and try, wait, let me try to, yeah, I can, yeah, laser pointer. And after you've modeled right and wrong ways to do this, make it make sense by saying, okay, so make we use when we're talking about creating, constructing, communicating, as opposed to do, which we use when the activity is more something you perform, something you complete, and then just set down examples. Or for example, I always use orange for adjectives, and these are some adjective suffixes. So I will draw attention to how we can turn a verb into an adjective by adding some of these suffixes, turn a noun into an adjective, and then do the same for other words, and then have them try to create the word and be like, okay, so this is wrong. It should be like this. Or I will codify also for parts of the sentence, and then I will use a red box for the subject, a green box for the main verb, and then a purple box for phrases within the for clauses. So and then I'll use blue for prepositional phrases. And every time we look at an example, whether it is spoken or it's in a book or it's just something from the workbook that we're using, I'll try to codify it the same so that it makes sense to them. And then when we are introducing new materials and more difficult structures, I can just draw back on these same colors, these same boxes. And for some of the students, that makes a lot of sense. And again, if we can do this together, like where would you put this? Like what color would you put here? Where is my clause? Where is which one is the subject? Can a subject start with a verb? Whatever. And when they do this collectively, that helps it be a little bit more memorable to them, I think. Again, here I'm using like my word code, which is I'll use red for nouns, orange for adjectives, green for verbs, and a darker green for adverbs. And then when I have a clause connector, I'll use purple for that. And here, what I was trying to point out is what makes sense in this sentence. So I have a noun. So before a noun, I can have an adjective. So it makes sense for the word to be for the correct answer to be an adjective. Here it is right after the verb. So and then I have a prepositional phrase. So it makes sense for this word to be an adverb, to be related to the verb. Stuff like that. Of course, these classes are a little bit more advanced, but I think you can adapt it to different levels and make it make sense to your students. And what I mean by the color coding is just create a common language in your classroom that becomes kind of a code, kind of your thing. And that way they can also, like it makes them focus their attention because they have to think about the code when they're practicing, right? Oh, wow. I think I'm breezing through this. Okay, so far, are there any questions? Because this presentation is quite short, and I feel we're going to have a lot of discussion after. Any questions, any ideas that you have around establishing an inner code or starting to model structures? Nope. Oh, Sandra, please.
Thank you. I was wondering if maybe like I don't know if it would be seen as cheating, but would it work like maybe post-its? I'm thinking because sometimes I forget like what an adverb is, like what I don't know, insert the word here, but I kind of forget them. So I was thinking like maybe putting post-its, like, yeah, okay, we remember that adverbs go in orange, but also here in the orange post-it that we have in classroom, we can see what an adverb is. So
Yeah,
in case they
totally.
forget it. But I don't know if that would be like, well, giving the answers and like, oh, well, what's the point of learning it if it's already there, you know?
No. I think it makes total sense, actually. I think this is actually what you're aiming for at this stage. You're kind of giving them what they need to start putting that into like, so you give them more and more examples. So you're giving them like a cheat sheet, and that's good because if they have a cheat sheet, they can check back on it until the knowledge is well cemented, I think. So I feel like that's actually a great way to go about it. Because also, yeah, like maybe depending on what kind of classroom you have and what kind of Spanish lessons they're having, maybe they don't really have like, oh yeah, adjective, adverb. That's not something that they use. But you could use again like an inner code and build towards that. Like, what words are related to this noun? What words are connected to the verb? What words are telling us about the verb? Okay, so because these are about the verb, they're adverbs. Many adverbs end with ly, So and play with it. Like ly is very much like the mente ending in Spanish. So it's like rápidamente. And then you can use some words that don't translate quite so well, and it makes it super funny and it makes it more memorable. And keep the cheat sheet as long as you need for them to really remember it. So it can be something to check back on. Yeah, I love that idea actually. Anyone else? If you need me to go to a specific slide also, please tell me. Okay, so I had this one. So this one would be also like using word songs. I'm very musical, so I like to listen to songs closely and find examples, which has ruined everything for me because now when I'm relaxing and listening to music, sometimes I'll just be like, "Oh, I need this for class," and I'll just stop everything and stop my relaxing time and be like, "Oh, I'll just extract this bit of lyrics for later." um, but it is helpful because then you can find whatever structure you need and just find examples, actual examples, and have them listen to just tiny bits of songs, which isn't as boring as trying to listen to one song over and over again, and then go into why each of these songs are a good example of what you want to model. Now this one can be fun because if you're a little bit clownish like me, you can kind of exaggerate it and be like, does that sound right? No, this is not right. So which version of the verb should it be? Who votes for this one? Who votes for that one? And then of course it's a very fun like structure building kind of thing. And again, if there are things that you can kind of like have cut out and stick, that also gets them moving. And even though it's a very small way to move, just come here and stick the pronoun in the right part of the board, it's enough for them to not get as bored, to be like, oh, maybe I'm next, maybe. So it keeps the attention on what where you want it. So that's a good thing here. And again, it all depends on the kind of classroom you have, because now there's also, if you have a very technological classroom and you can actually have access to maybe tablets or things, you can even use online tools like, I think it's Caboozle. There's like this page where you can create like a little quiz and it's like a TV show. And then if you have even people in groups like in tablet, they can try to tap on the right answer, and at the end there's like this whole thing on the screen of who got first place, who got second place, who got it right, who got perfect scores, and that makes it quite fun. Kahoot, that's the one. Thank you, Kahoot. That's the one. I'm so bad with names. And again, for me, color coding is great because there are so many ways you can use it. And you can make it fun. You can make it about like having like little candy or marbles if you want kids to also get distracted with like little things that they can touch. And so, last part. So, gradually, we're having the students participate more and more. I love to have students participate all the time if possible. But at this point, we are trying to get them to muddle the structure themselves, to use the vocabulary themselves, to maybe connect it to previous vocabulary, to use new words if they want to. Like, if you need to ask me about a word, please let me know to complete your sentences. And you can have students interact with each other, but again, bearing in mind that interaction is not for everyone. So not being like too adamant about like you need to participate with your partner. Like maybe a good point to remember that you want to try to model for activities different enough for students who aren't super social to also like practice and um, not get distracted by the fact that they have to speak to someone and that's not something they like to do. So it could be very short writing tasks. So this one would be related to the pronouns and proper usage of verbs. What does she like to do? What does Laura like to do? What do we like to do? Who likes to dance? Blah, blah, blah. And then they would have to fill in with the appropriate with an appropriate pronoun. And you could make it like this and have them just use pronouns and a verb here, or you could give them options. And again, it's a good moment. I love this illustration. I don't know if you can see it, but they have words hidden all over the place, and I love these illustrations. They're pretty. So again, you could do a little bit of movement-based learning when you're focusing on some verbs, and then you can have people both spell them out and then act it out. And you could build towards a little charades exercise using like, what do you like to do? And they have to act it out. Or if you're having people too distracted by their phone, use that to your advantage. And if it's a movement verb, make them find a GIF and then try to find the best GIF. Like everyone shares a GIF and then they vote and decide which GIF is the best to explain the activity. Images are always a great way to get people talking and get people to practice some of their vocabulary, and they could spell it out here, they could act it out, they could describe the person who is doing this or that. So when you're using images, that's always a plus in a classroom, especially with kids. And if they are drawings that have a lot of like little funny things happening in them, I find that those are super compelling. Like they'll keep the attention of the kids long enough for them to try to practice at least a little bit. Again, these drawings are so cute. The cord says cord and the mirror says mirror. And I think that's awesome. So if they have like little hidden gems, you can also make that into a little bit of a game during class. Like find a word in this picture, find someone who is distracted, find someone who's having an accident, like this person dropping the soda on this little boy, right? And then you can sort of, if you're finding that the attention is getting too scattered, bring it back to whatever it is you want to do. And for me also, this is a good point to introduce a reading task. So again, here I'm using my color coding as an example. So again, dark green will be used for adverbs. And here, all of the adverbs that I pointed out have the ly ending. And all the adjectives with some adjective suffixes are in orange. And verbs are green. So here I actually have like all three versions of this word, like fright as a noun, frightened as a verb, frightened as a an adjective, using the most used book for English learning still. I think there was like this thing, and I'm not sure if they have done a new study about this, but many people around the world have learned English through Harry Potter, reading the Harry Potter series. They have such good translations that it has become a very good like staple book for kids to learn the language. And it's still popular enough that a lot of my students are very keen on reading it in English. And for example, you could make that into a challenge, like have people find as many adverbs, as many verbs, as many adjectives with like those suffixes as possible, as many nouns, and then have the quickest group to find all the examples of whatever it is you're trying to model in a page. Like those are the winners for the day, right? So this would be a good way for them to get into a little bit of structure, make it fun, and then you can go back and read the whole thing, right? And practice pronunciation, practice reading skills. You would give each student a couple of lines and then do a couple of lines yourself and then just pass it along and finish a bit of a book of any kind of reading that you'd like to take on and have that be a very cross ability kind of class. So those are some examples of how I would go about introducing a new topic in my classroom. And we have a lot of time for comments, questions, other suggestions. Experiences. Antonio, go ahead. And
So,
then,
I have a question. Uh, the images that you showed us, uh, they have a specific name, or how can how can we look for them in internet or in a book, for example? The images with the action with a lot of people and the little names hidden in the image.
so honestly, I am a big fan of Pinterest for this kind of thing. If you start looking for illustrations that look like this, kind of like Finding Waldo illustrations or even little comic book strips, I love to teach using comic book strips also. Then the website itself starts sharing more ideas that are similar, and then there are so many of them. Let me actually go to Pinterest, and I'll go to that specific board. um Let me see. So, and there are also like coloring pages which are great, but for example, I'll try to do like images. Sometimes they can have a lot of content, and then you have to maybe choose something that isn't quite so full of things. So Pinterest for me is a great tool, and I get inspired there so many times. So they sometimes have things like this, which is so good for giving directions, right? And if you find one, then you'll have more like that right below it. Some of them which you can build yourself, and you could use those and actually create like a little town with your benches in the classroom, right? Like have each bench be a street, have people name their streets, and then give each other directions. um, there are some that have a lot of like funny things happening in them, or a lot of different characters, and then you can talk about the characters, talk about what's happening. Some of them I actually got, not all of them are from Pinterest. I just remembered some of them are from the freely downloadable materials in the Cambridge sites for A2, I think pre A2 and A2 students. So they have a lot of material that you can download, and they have vocabulary lists, and they have these books, and they have conversation. Like they have a bunch of stuff. Let me also try to open one of those. A2 Liars, I think. Yes. So this is an assessment book for the Cambridge test, and it's a picture book, so you can use it however you like. Yeah, so I got some of them, as you can see from the, and they have actual characters, right? So they have these characters, and they have some highlighted words that they're supposed to learn. They have the isolated pictures for some vocabulary items. This one is about the season, so they talk about what they're doing each season. You need to find things in the picture. They have speaking activities. So these are great books, and you can just find them online for many levels for kids. And at the end, they have the list of words, I think, and some other exercises. So writing exercises. Mhm. Word banks, games. A to Z word list. So these ones are super useful, but if not, I'll just go into Pinterest and go into one of these images that I find, for example, this one, and then I'll find some other pictures that might be more useful for a class because maybe I want less characters and more things to be on them. Maybe I just want a little kitchen, and then I'll talk about like verbs of how I could use these ingredients. So there are a lot of visual recipes, and those are also quite useful. So it's a whole world because like people are just uploading stuff there all the time, and it's a great way to get good images. I Spy. Yeah. So yeah, treasure trove.
Thank you, Marisa.
I'm sure there
I
are
think
better ways, and yeah, I think there's a lot of technology now, and there are probably better ways to find stuff, but I'm very old. I'm very old school this way, and I'm very comfortable just using Pinterest.
I remember playing with this kind of books when I was a kid, and I think they're very fun. They're a very fun way to start to learn a little bit of vocabulary.
Yeah, yeah. I also really like comic strips because it is very restricted communication. So it's just a short conversation. So it's just Calvin speaking to Hobbes, or sometimes it's a lot of images and just a tiny bit of text. Sometimes they have quite complex sentences also, and they are great ways to get students to also find examples of the structure you're modeling, find examples of words that you want them to learn. And they're endearing, cute images. They're funny, so it's very lighthearted when you do it like that. I think there was another raised hand, but I'm not sure who it was. Or whether anyone else has something to say. Something to share, other books other sources that they found useful. Yes, Leslie?
I don't know if this is too much, but can you model a class for us, like going through these 4 steps that you show us today?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, sure. So actually the one of the things that I put here was oh no. Yes, this is right. I don't know. No, I think that's wrong. Wait. I'll try to share the right thing now. Oh, where is it? So I actually, when I was thinking about this class, this is the one that oh, hold on. I was thinking about the class using the right conjugations of verbs in present tense. So the way I would go about it from the introduction would be, wait. Yeah. So at first, what I would do is I would explain this, right? Like that's why I use this example about, do you remember your pronouns? So I'm assuming that at this point we have reviewed pronouns. And because we have reviewed pronouns, I could use a blackboard to sort of like say, okay, so what are the pronouns? Okay, so it's I, and then what other pronoun can you remember? We, and blah, 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 blah. So I would probably also make them stand up and stand in groups with a few people or with just one person and be like, okay, so if we're talking about this person, if we're talking about this group, what would you say? What would they say? And have them be very clear on the pronouns. And I would have these images, the isolated images, I, you, they, something that is very graphic, already printed out in cardboard. And I would put those in the blackboard and then start modeling some examples of very simple sentences using the verbs that I want to use and those pronouns. So does you like basketball? Does she like basketball? Does that sound right? Yes, that one is right. I would probably use regular verbs like. Well, it doesn't really matter because it's present conjugation. So I would just try to make sure that they understand that whenever I'm using she or it or he or who, I am using a different form of the verb. And then I would probably add an S, a printed out S on those pronouns. And then I would put them up on the blackboard. I am adding the be verb because if we're doing introductions and we're like, oh, she is Gina, she likes whatever, it's useful to have it there. But I would try to go for other verbs which do follow the regular rule, well, the normal rule for conjugation with the S, right? And I would try to find examples of different spellings here, like something that ends in Y, try or fly, something that ends in X, like fix, or with an S, like dress, dresses, to model for variations of this conjugation. And I would get, after some examples, the students to try to get the right pronouns in the right line, like with the S or without, to sort of have like their own model of it. And then I would get them to look at these images and be like, what does she like to do? What does the cat like to do? What does the girl in the flowery blouse like to do? So they like to play music. Oh, sorry, I skipped over something. I would also create like a word bank for the verbs where we're doing this whole like spelling them out and acting them out. And then I would point them out in the image. And in the practice section, once we move on to them trying to model it, I would have them talk about the pictures and talk about what someone likes to do. What do the boy and girl like to do? They like to build a fort. What do the kids at the party like to do? They like to dance, right? But what does he like to do? He likes to eat, right? And then I would have them check that the conjugations are correct for them or her or him, or if they name them, because that's also a possibility, the lady, the kid's mom or whatever. The cat would be an it. And I would have them write out a few examples, a few of their favorite examples from the pictures in their notebooks, just to finish this like first part of the class, like this intro. I think I went through it a little bit quickly. Was that clear? Yeah. I think maybe it would be a good idea. I'll try to write it down in the format that you guys have, because I was doing like different kinds of examples here. I don't think it's quite so clear, but I will try to write it down in that format and send it over to you today so that you can take a look at it. So that would be it. One of my ideas for this. And I guess your planning so far is going up to this point, but after this, what I would do is I would try to take it out of fantasy world and have them talk about their likes and dislikes, their friends' likes and dislikes, the classroom's likes and dislikes. Like, does anyone like to play music? And I would have some people raise their hands. So people in my classroom like to play music. People like my friend Maria, she likes to dance. I don't like to dance. And I would model for affirmative, negative sentences, questions. course, this is ambitious because, again, we have a time constraint. We are trying to do a lot of different things, but
It's me or we lost Marisa? Okay.
¿Puedo aprovechar para hacer una pregunta?
Sí, dale, Sandy.
Ah, gracias. Es sobre la actividad que tenemos que hacer de la planificación. Bueno, me voy en la parte de apertura y me surgió la duda de esta apertura que vamos a planear para la planificación, valga la redundancia, ¿tiene que estar directamente relacionada con la actividad o es más bien como de antes de la actividad que estábamos poniendo? Por ejemplo, bueno, aquí ya me voy a aventar yo un poco, ¿no? Yo escogí introducciones, personal introductions, como para presentarse, y en mi actividad de apertura se me ocurría como, pues no sé, bueno, otra cosa, ¿no? Por ejemplo, el presenta a tu compañerito, pero después digo, ¿qué tal que estoy planeando mi actividad de apertura considerando que ellos ya saben lo que les estoy enseñando? ¿O es más bien una actividad de apertura como icebreaker, como desde cero no sabemos nada y ya después les voy a enseñar como el tema? ¿Saben a lo que me refiero?
Sí, totalmente. Justo puede ser como el momento en el que intervengan con estos icebreakers para que sus estudiantes se enganchen con la clase y demás, pero también es una oportunidad para conectar con digamos, como con los conocimientos previos que tienen los y las estudiantes. Si en este caso están abordando, dijiste que son presentaciones, ¿cierto? Quizás podrías como abordar preguntas generales, como una lluvia de ideas de por qué, dónde radica la importancia de presentarnos a los demás, o para qué nos sirven las presentaciones. Entonces, como estar explorando antes de que lleguemos al contenido tal cual, antes de que tú bajes el contenido con ellas y con ellos.
Ah, va, ok, pero entonces como, o sea, como sí conectarlo, pero dejarlo un poquito más abierto, ¿no? Como no tan de, híjole, señorita, ya quieres que me sepa cosas que no me has dicho, ¿no? Entonces, pero va, ok, gracias, me queda más claro.
Sí, que bueno, justo es una exploración de lo que ellos y ellas saben. Eh, lo que dice Ubaldo, el iceberg que funciona como un gancho, como mantenerlos en sintonía con la clase y enganchados. Y Leslie, sí, también pueden trabajar HCE. Recuerden lo que veíamos con ficha ruler, como el potencial que tiene de integrar algunas de las pequeñas actividades dentro de sus rutinas o de su día a día. Entonces, si ustedes también quieren rescatar algo de HSE, pueden hacerlo. Eh, Ix, no sé si quieras sumar algo con este tema de cómo arrancamos.
Sí, y yo también decía como que puede ser las dos opciones, a lo mejor que decida para ver cómo van avanzando, pero también podría ser como un icebreaker que les ayuda a sumar justo en la parte de habilidad socioemocional. O sea, a lo mejor yo noté que mis estudiantes están teniendo desafíos de hablar con ellos. Ah, bueno, vamos a hacer un ejercicio en el que se motiven a hablar o que tengan que hacer un recorrido con sus compañeros, ¿no? O quiero utilizar los icebreaker como un momento para empezar a conocerlos. A lo mejor pueden ser juegos como, y aprovechamos vocabulario. A ver, dime cuál es tu fruta favorita, ¿no? Y les llamamos vocabulario y entonces jugamos con esas letras. Entonces, siempre tiene que ver como una intencionalidad en cada actividad que ustedes hagan. O sea, como que no sea, ah, bueno, ahorita me pongo a hacer este juego y ya, sino más bien este juego o esta actividad cómo se va o cómo va a impactar en mis estudiantes y cómo me va a permitir a mí seguir fortaleciendo lo que quiero trabajar con ellos, ¿no? Y puede ser que lo alinee al tema que vamos a ver como algo que sea complementario o algo que aparentemente no tenga nada que ver, pero si yo tengo claridad para qué me va a servir, funciona. No sé si eso ayuda, Andy. Sí, como dice muy bien ahí Uva, tiene que haber esa transversalidad, ¿no? También. Eso.
Y respondiendo a la duda de Toño, no tenemos un ejemplo de este tipo de planificación porque ustedes también son precursores de este programa. Entonces, ustedes van a ser los consolidadores también de estos ejemplares que después seguro vamos a seguir utilizando con nuestras y nuestros PEM futuros. Pero sí. Leslie, perdón por ponerte en el foco, ¿de pura casualidad tienes alguna planificación, así como tú las trabajas con tus estudiantes?
Mm, Creo que de inglés no, tengo de primer semestre que di ética.
Sí, es que funciona diferente, pero bueno, sí, gracias, Leslie. Ix,
Sí, yo voy a decir que también está aquí Mónica y me es PEM 2023 y ella da clases de inglés, o sea, ella es em, licenciada en la enseñanza del idioma inglés y hicimos, o sea, como en un inicio estábamos planificando con la experiencia de aprendizaje y ya después pasamos a puesta en común, creo que ahora hay un intento de regresar a la experiencia de aprendizaje, pero ella también podría compartirles algunos tips, herramientas que se han aprendido en el camino para generar como estas actividades. Así que perdóname, Moni, si ya te puse en el foco, pero también para que te puedas sentir cómoda y compartir desde tu experiencia.
Hola, sí, buenas tardes. Como lo comenté, Shell, al principio del ciclo escolar estuve trabajando con lo de la experiencia de aprendizaje, pero ahorita como están comentando llega uno a esta etapa cuando uno asume que los estudiantes ya tienen que tener ciertos conocimientos previos. Pero, por ejemplo, yo en la escuela donde me tocó, los conocimientos previos los tienen 2 de 30 alumnos. Entonces, era como que esta parte de regresar, de está bien poner estas actividades de apertura. A lo mejor yo los ponía más como que en esta parte en español para que los ubicaran, porque muchas veces tampoco ubicaban los pronombres o los adjetivos o cuál era la diferencia en verbos. Entonces yo esta parte también se las estuve poniendo como de los 8 tipos de palabras que existen en español, tanto en inglés, para que ellos fueran identificando. Y pues en cada tema, en cada sesión, nuevamente recapitular como que esta parte de recordemos qué son los sujetos, recordemos qué son los adjetivos, los verbos, para que ellos también vayan identificando como que esta forma, los tipos de palabras y cómo estos tipos de palabras se fusionan dentro de las oraciones, para que ellos tengan como que en mente esta parte también de ya tenemos las palabras aisladas, pero ahora cómo podemos conectar estas palabras aisladas que tenemos para que formen una oración completa o una idea completa. Entonces, al principio yo cuando empecé con lo de la experiencia de aprendizaje, pues sí me fue muy difícil porque la experiencia que yo planifiqué yo asumía de cierta forma que ellos ya tenían conocimientos básicos de los temas, pero al implementarlo, pues resultaba muy complicado para ellos que fueran como que siguiendo esas instrucciones que que ya había yo planificado para cada etapa. Entonces, lo dejé pasar la primera experiencia, ya con los resultados, yo tenía mis expectativas del 100%, no se logró al 100%, yo creo que se logró como un 20 o 30% ya al implementar esta experiencia. Ya después, por sugerencia de Mikla, de Ichel, pusimos en marcha lo de las puestas en común, que yo le había comentado que yo también ya había pensado esto de las puestas en común, ponerlas durante las experiencias de aprendizaje, porque al final es esta parte de recapitular los temas o los conceptos que fueron un poco más retadores o difíciles para los alumnos para retomarlo y poder avanzar, porque si yo daba por visto el tema, esas cosas o ese vocabulario, esa gramática que estábamos llevando, pues lo iban a seguir arrastrando ellos sin tener 100% del conocimiento de que lo habían entendido y de que lo podían identificar y de que lo podían poner en práctica. Entonces, con las puestas en común, estaba yo trabajando esta parte. De nuevamente, yo sentía que a lo mejor era muy poco el tema que se veía, pero ese tema era como que lo que necesitaban los alumnos en su momento. Entonces era como acortar en sí la gramática o el tema que estuviéramos viendo y enfocarse a lo mejor nada más a dos verbos y a los sujetos. Estuvimos viendo, por ejemplo, del presente, hacer como que el hincapié a esta parte de los cambios que tiene el verbo, de con qué sujetos cambia el verbo para que ellos como que lo identificaran y también poner, yo sí también utilizaba esta parte de los colores, azul, verde, rojo, sujeto, verbo, predicado, para que ellos lo fueran identificando. Y pues al final sí es esta parte también de uno de conocer primero a los estudiantes y el nivel que tienen, porque si asumimos que ellos tienen o conocen los conceptos básicos que uno lo percibe así, muchas veces para ellos no es tan básico como nosotros lo damos a entender. Entonces, pues yo creo que lo de las cosas en común yo le había dicho a Michelle que me gustaba, pero ahorita que ya tengo pues prácticamente el año con los chicos aquí, ya tienen como que esta forma de trabajo de presentar un objetivo, de las habilidades socioemocionales, de la forma de trabajo, se presenta el tema, la práctica que hacemos en conjunto y ya después lo que a ellos les toca hacer después de esta práctica. Yo por eso le había comentado a Michelle que para este próximo ciclo escolar quería yo retomar nuevamente lo de las experiencias de aprendizaje, porque yo ya sé que ellos, los niños, ya tienen esta estructura de la clase, de qué es lo que esperan que van a hacer a diferencia de cuando yo entré, que no teníamos una estructura en sí establecida, sino que simplemente yo me lancé con lo de la experiencia, esperando que pues ellos me siguieran el paso, o siguieran el paso de las instrucciones que aparentemente para mí eran muy claras, pero para ellos no eran tan claras como parecían. Y en sí, pues eso es como que, en resumen, todo lo que ahorita estuve haciendo con ellos en este ciclo escolar. Para el siguiente, como comento, pues quiero poner otra vez como que en práctica esto, lo de las experiencias de aprendizaje, pero ya con esta estructura que los chicos conocen.
Gracias por compartirnos, Moni, toda tu experiencia de justo cómo estás trabajando inglés ya en el ciclo regular. La ventaja acá es que para quienes están diseñando en la actualidad, a partir de este aprendizaje esperado que ustedes ya delimitaron y de este objetivo, nuestra sugerencia es que sigan trabajando tal cual. Ahorita no se preocupen, como estamos trabajando en un supuesto donde nuestros estudiantes tienen los conocimientos necesarios para poder aterrizar el aprendizaje y el objetivo. Entonces, ustedes continúen desarrollando estas actividades como si sus estudiantes ya tienen estas competencias necesarias para poder darle marcha a este objetivo que están planteando. Creo que esa es la ventaja de poder diseñar hipotéticamente, como poder trabajar de manera activa en esto. Entonces, también es una posibilidad para a lo mejor incorporar algunas herramientas tecnológicas que ustedes consideren y que podrían ser útiles. Por ahí ya nos estaba presentando Marisa una serie de consideraciones, entonces jugar también con los temas visuales, que bien Marisa ha señalado como el tema de los colores, la importancia de que esto nos permita categorizar cosas. Entonces, jueguen y traten de poner como de llevar al límite de su creatividad para la construcción de este plan de elección. Dice Leslie, dejen volar su imaginación. Sí, totalmente. Creo que va a ser útil que estén pensando en lo que pueden hacer, en el potencial que tienen. Y también recuerden, no se estresen si hay como alguna duda, si quieren compartir algunas ideas. Está su coordinadora, está Ix, estoy yo. Por acá también tenemos a Moni, a Leslie, que tienen experiencia ya en la implementación de inglés. Entonces, ustedes solo pidan apoyo de donde ustedes vean que pueden darles este apoyo y estamos a su disposición. Entonces, creo que ya estamos en tiempo, pero no sé si Ix quiere sumar algo o Sari quiere sumar algo.
Sí, yo nada más brevemente, como justo esto que nos compartía Moni, es un poco de la experiencia, o sea, como justo de la experiencia ya en este primer año, la forma en la que estas formas de formatos que se refería Moni, son unos que ya no les tocó. Ustedes van a diseñar justo en este nuestro nuevo formato, que es especial para inglés, y también pensando en cómo podríamos dinamizar estas experiencias del aprendizaje en el idioma. Y pues eso también, reforzar esto que dices, Sam, como pues tranquilos, tranquilas. O sea, creo que también nosotros estamos aprendiendo, o sea, nosotros como docentes, como profesionales de Ya por México, estamos en este momento de aprender y bien dicen, o sea, este es el momento de ser creativos, de echar la casa por la ventana, casi casi. O sea, ustedes entréguense como a este proceso, porque esa es la mejor forma de consolidar el aprendizaje. Bien, gracias, Sari y Samu.
Y nada más para la invitación, equipo, pues ya vimos dos partes, ¿no? En lo que es la apertura y la introducción a nuevo contenido. Entonces, ahí tienen su lista de cotejo, ¿no? De qué es lo que se está pidiendo en cada parte, ¿no? Ahí viene el tiempo, vienen como cosas que son clave. Entonces, por favor, no olviden de comenzar a escribir. El día lunes vamos a tener las otras dos partes, ¿sale? Que son las prácticas y el cierre, para comenzar a preparar nuestra primera entrega completa, que es la de una clase, ¿sale? Por ahí también siento que como esta incertidumbre de, ay, ¿para quién diseño, no? Tenemos los perfiles de grupo que por ahí ya han sido compartidos. Tenemos también, pues, estas experiencias que nos han mencionado Leslie y Moni. Entonces, la invitación adicional también que hago con mis compañeras es, a veces esta mente de perfeccionismo, ¿no? No nos deja avanzar o nos paraliza porque todo debe estar muy bien y debe de encajar y debe de verse de alguna manera. Y hay veces que no, ¿no? Y está bien, es parte también de su rol como facilitador, después estar haciendo las adaptaciones, pero por ahora hagamos esta práctica, veamos qué pasa, estemos bien atentas y atentos a la retroalimentación y les aseguro que poco a poco van a ir haciéndolo hasta ya mucho más rápido y de verdad como con diferentes opciones ahí en cuanto a diferenciación de niveles, ¿no? Entonces, ustedes vamos como con el primer pasito, y pues la invitación es estar haciendo sus pininos, ¿no? Ya escribiendo como estas dos primeras partes, apertura e introducción a nuevo contenido. Y pues, no sé, Sam, ¿hay algo más? ¿No? ¿Quieren dar el cierre? O indicaciones, nos vemos más tarde, ¿verdad? En el caso de candidatas y candidatos. Va. Pues provechito, que tengan bonita comida.